Previously on CoCo.
So we start off on the alphanumeric display mode, and if I just hit the space bar, that advances me to the next mode. I hit it again. Third mode looks a lot like the first mode. We'll need to talk about that. Third mode looks a lot like the first mode. We'll need to talk about that. We'll need to talk about that. We'll need to talk about that. Bonus. Are alphanumeric and Semigraphic 4 really different modes? Or are they just different character sets that can be rendered in the same mode? What is a mode? What is all a mode? Everything I had read tried to convince me they are different modes. William Barden Jr.'s book, Color Computer Graphics, says there are 3 basic display modes: alphanumeric, alpha-semigraphic, and graphic. Alphanumeric is different from semigraphic. The alpha-semigraphic mode is a low-resolution mode that is related to the alphanumeric mode. When a semigraphic character is put to the screen, in addition to setting the most significant bit in the video memory byte associated with the character position, the basic interpreter sets the VDG to the semigraphics mode. So surely it must be different from the alphanumeric mode. In assembly language programming for the TRS-80 color computer, Lawrence E. Tepolt says, AI and SG4 are different modes. Why else would they be different rows in that table? Alphanumeric text gets its own section. Semigraphics 4 gets its own section. And then possibly the most enigmatic passage of all. Each display mode is unique, and only one can be in use at any one time. Except AI and SG4. AI and SG4 are the same display mode, with different alphanumeric and semigraphic character sets. But surely this is all nonsense, I say. Just look at the table. What's the difference between AI and SG4? Sure, there's a C in bit 3 for AI, and there's an X in bit 3 for SG4. But if you think about a stream of all 0 bits for 76543, how could the VDG possibly distinguish between whether I wanted AI in color mode 0 or SG4 where the color mode is just not relevant? It cannot distinguish. They surely must be the same mode, right? But then I opened up the technical data sheet for the 6847. That's the VDG on the CoCo. And it blew my mind. There's a section on how its mode can be controlled, and it talks about the different pins on the chip that can be used to control the mode. And it says, AS, IntExt, CSS, and INV may be changed on a character-by-character basis. You can change the mode on a character-by-character basis? This threw everything I thought I knew out the window. I thought a mode remained constant on the screen. I thought the mode dictated how the bytes in the screen buffer would be interpreted and translated into images, but that you couldn't change your mode from character to character. According to this, you could have one screen and multiple modes in use simultaneously. I was hungry for more, so I read up in that datasheet about the alphanumeric internal mode. According to the description, the alphanumeric internal mode is only capable of doing these characters. No semigraphic characters at all, but these only require 6 bits. That leaves 2 bits free, and these may be externally connected to the mode pins. So a byte in your screen buffer can have its bits connected to the mode pins. Different characters, different modes. Is this what the CoCo actually does? According to the Cocopedia, the CoCo is physically wired such that its default alphanumeric display is actually Semigraphics 4 mode. What does the CoCo service manual say? The main mode bits, GM0, GM1, GM2, they all come in from here, the PIA2. So I believe this is where hex FF22 comes from. However, check out the other pieces to the puzzle that determine what mode we're in. The INV is hardwired to bit 6 of the incoming data stream from the screen buffer. And AS, the one we're concerned with, is hardwired to DD7. of the incoming data stream from the screen buffer. That means when the highest order bit is set, that changes the mode for that one character. And also interestingly, when the next highest order bit is set, that determines whether that character is inverted or not, and that is also considered another mode in the VDG. So that led me to make a small adjustment to that table from the Tepolt book. So my understanding, these bits that come from FF22 relate to these pins on the VDG. So you'll notice these are not all of the pins required to determine the mode. One of the things that's missing is the AS pin. That determines whether we're in alpha or semigraphic mode. That comes in from the bytes, from the screen buffer. So while it is true that no one could possibly distinguish between all zeros referencing either the AI mode or the SG4 mode, that high order bit from the bytes coming in from the screen buffer added to this would then distinguish between these two modes. There was another discrepancy between this table and the table from the VDG spec sheet. The table from the VDG spec sheet has X's, and all the GMs, GM0, 1, and 2 are all X's when we're either in alphanumeric or semigraphic mode. But they do have this column for int X'd. This, I think, is primarily used to tell the VDG whether we're going to use the internal character generator or some external character generator if we want to use different character sets or different fonts from another chip. And you can see here these zeros relate to internal and these ones relate to external. But when the AS bit is set, so that means we're supposed to be in semigraphic, then int X can distinguish between Semigraphics 4 and Semigraphics 6. But these columns aren't in the Tepolt book. Well, the CoCo 2 architecture does something interesting. If you take a look at GM0, you'll see that it gets hardwired to int X'd. So in the Tepolt book, whenever he talks about GM0, he's actually talking about either of these. So if this has an X, this is the one that takes precedence, and if this has an X, then this is the one that takes precedence. So the way to read this is, when this has an X, then that is the column that in the Tepolt book relates to GM0, and similarly over here. But down here, for all the true graphics modes where int X is an X, that's when the GM0 column actually relates to this GM0 column. And when I make that adjustment, finally, this from the Tepolt book matches this from the 6847 technical sheet, with one exception. So back on Cocopedia, I saw this startling passage. By setting the SAM such that it believes it is displaying a full graphics mode, but leaving the VDG in alphanumeric semigraphics 4 mode, it is possible to subdivide the character box into smaller pieces. This creates virtual modes, semigraphics 8, 12, and 24. So what I didn't realize is that these were a quirk. These weren't really intentional. I mean, surely, because BASIC can't access them, they weren't all that important. But I didn't realize that these were really just considered quirks. And apparently so quirky they were not implemented on the CoCo 3. And that explains why on the datasheet for the 6847, the semigraphics modes only go up to 6. There actually aren't any other semigraphics modes that it was intending to implement. That was just a weird thing that happened when you said semigraphics plus a super large buffer. Special thanks to Julian, who commented on one of my other videos, the surprising difference between printing and direct screen pokes. He wrote, "You only have 64 characters in there, 0 to 63. Bit 6 of the data bus is mapped to the inv line of 6847. All this would repeat again for 128 to 256, but the A-semi control line is tied to bit 7 of the data bus, so everything over 127 is automatically blocked semigraphics." This comment arrived at a very coincidental time right as I was working on this video, and it certainly helped me to confirm my evolving understanding as I was reading through the document, so thanks a lot for the comment. Holy cannoli zizzins! This was way more complicated than I expected. I think I understand things better, but it's entirely possible I misstated or flat out said completely false statements. So for those of you out there who actually do understand how this stuff works, please feel free to correct any of my mistakes in the comment section.